Welcome to the lecture series Programming in C, in which we will be focusing on how C programming styles can be. In this module, we will be concentrating on how the character set has to be defined, what are the C tokens that are possible and that are applicable for programming, then what are the identifiers and keywords, and finally we will be looking into the constants and various types of constants. We will focus more on character set. C allows the character set of all the English alphabets, say from the lowercase characters A to Z and the uppercase characters A to Z. But C programming allows the alphabets to be of case sensitive, in the sense that if we are using a lowercase character A which is different from the uppercase character A. So, always if we are defining an identifier or a name for a variable, so we will be using the alphabets or the character set. The character set should be in such a way that the lowercase character should be given only as lowercase and the uppercase character should be given only as uppercase. So, that is the reason that the lowercase and the uppercase characters are differentiated in English alphabets for the C character set, and the digits from 0 to 9 are allowed, and the special symbols like curly braces. So, this is what is the curly braces we use for starting of a program. Say for example, if the program starts with the function main, we will be using the curly braces to identify the start of the program and the end curly braces. So, similarly, various special symbols are used for various purposes, say starting from the function definition, the function statements and the square brackets. These are the square brackets which are used for array representation, and additionally we will be using various operators for arithmetic operations, for Boolean operations, for relational operations and logical operations. We will be using the special characters or special symbols meant for the specific operations. Say for instance, here we can see that the operators plus, minus, asterisk, slash are all used for arithmetic operations. Then C also allows the blank space, new line character, horizontal tabs, carriage written and form feed characters. These characters are non-printable characters. We will not be able to see these characters on the screen or monitor, but then these characters carries its own meaning. So, for instance, new line character is represented in C as \n, which means that the new line will be given from the line which is on current printing. Apart from that, these are the special characters which are shown in the table, which are allowed as character set in C language, which also adds some of the special symbols like hash symbol, question mark. The hash symbol is meant for adding pre-processor directives, and the question symbol is a ternary operator which is again meant for a specific operation, which we will be looking into the future series. Then we will look into C tokens. What are tokens? The tokens are the words that are formed by the character set. We have seen that C allows certain set of characters including the English alphabets, the digits, special symbols. So, using those character set, if we are able to follow certain words, then those words are called tokens in C language. The tokens will allow us to represent certain individual entity of the C language. So, which includes the identifiers, keywords, constants, operators and punctuation symbols. out of which the identifiers and keywords are used for identifying and representing and distinguishing the variable names. The constants are the values which we use as constants, which will not be modified throughout the program. Operators are the symbols which are meant for specific operations for arithmetic, relational, logical and ternary operation. And apart from that, the punctuation symbols will help us identify or represent different meanings for different statements. Say for instance, if you use a colon, the colon symbol, punctuation symbol can be used to represent a case statement, and we will be using the semicolon as the representation of the end of the statement. So, similarly, the punctuation symbol has got its own meaning in various statements to represent the various operations. So, let us go into the identifiers and keywords. We will learn certain things with respect to identifiers. The identifiers are classified into two types called user defined and system defined. User, from the terminology we will be able to understand that user defined identifiers are defined by the users by following certain norms and certain things that how the identifier has to be defined. Whereas system defined identifiers are already defined by the C compiler. So, we will not be able to modify its meaning as well as its name. We will be able to just use those system defined identifiers as such in the program. And every system identified or system defined identifier has got its own meaning. So, we will have to follow those representations as such in the program. So, the identifiers are basically used for naming a variable, a function or a label in a program. If it is going to be a user defined identifier, we need to know certain things, how the identifier has to be defined. What are the rules that I am supposed to follow when I am supposed to define an identifier? The first rule says that a valid identifier can have letters, both uppercase and lowercase letters are allowed, and you can have digits and underscores. But the first letter of an identifier should always be a letter or an underscore symbol. So, it means that if I am going to use an identifier which is going to have digits, see the identifier named as A123, this is allowed even if it has digits in the identifier, whereas the identifier with only digits, say like this is not a valid identifier. So, remember, I repeat, the valid identifier should start only with a letter, either uppercase or lowercase, or an identifier special symbol underscore is allowed to name a variable. Say for instance, I can make use of an underscore, and with that I can identify, with that I can name an identifier. Even an underscore with only digits is allowed, whereas the identifier starting from the digit is not a valid identifier. And the system defined identifiers are also called as keywords. So, those words, as we have already seen, those words are defined by the system which cannot be modified. So, what we are supposed to do, we are not supposed to use those keywords as user defined identifiers. Say for instance, the keywords int, the keyword while, these are all the keywords used for. Int is used for defining a variable, while is used for defining a looping statement. So, these statements or these keywords are not allowed as identifiers. because the compiler will get confused if we are going to use a word which is defined by the system, which is already defined by the compiler. So, we are supposed to use or we are supposed to name only with the identifiers which is not used as keywords. And there is no rule for every compiler that the maximum length of the keyword or of the identifier. However, it is limited to 31 characters. So, always we should see to that the identifier which we are using should not be more than 31 characters. Even if some compilers allow, it is better to undergo or it is better to follow a programming style in which more than 31 characters should not be used as an identifier. So, in this slide you can see some list of valid identifiers and invalid identifiers. Let us take one by one and we will just do a simple analysis on it. So, the valid identifier, the first valid identifier, it is my variable, okay, in which the V is mentioned as the capital or the uppercase character. However, the key or the word or the identifier starts with a letter. So, it is considered to be a valid identifier. In the second case, the identifier starts with the underscore symbol. So, we have already learnt that underscore is a special symbol which can be allowed as a first character in the identifier. So, hash temp is also considered to be a valid identifier. Then max underscore value, is it a valid identifier? Yes, it is. It is of uppercase characters and it includes only underscore. So, this is also considered to be a valid identifier. And I use function 1 to 3. Function is a string or with of characters, alphabets, and then it follows with the digits. Yes, this is also an valid identifier. Then I use A1 underscore B2 underscore C3. Okay. This is also a valid identifier because it starts with the naming convention of having alphabet as the first letter, it includes digits, it includes underscores. Fine. Now, comparing to the invalid identifiers, the first one starts with a numerical value which is not a valid identifier. In the second case, it includes a special symbol dollar which is not considered to be a special symbol which can be allowed. So, this is also an invalid identifier. Then in the third case, for is a keyword. So, I mentioned that for is a keyword. So, since for is a keyword, it is also not allowed as a identifier. And in the fourth case, the identifier exceeds the maximum limit of 31 characters. So, it is not allowed. And the fifth case, it includes a special symbol semicolon as the first character, which is again not allowed as a valid identifier. I hope you will be able to now understand how we are supposed to name an identifier and what are the conventions that we are supposed to follow. But one thing we have to remember that whenever we are trying to name a variable or if you are trying to define an identifier, see to that it should be meaningful. In the sense that supposing if I am using a variable for storing student mark details, then it is better that it should convey some meaning that it can be either given as student underscore marks. This can be allowed, this will be conveying the meaning, or you can even shorten it if at all if we want as student M, which also conveys its meaning. But whenever we we define an identifier, see to that it should be aligned with the purpose of the identifier or purpose of its nature. Okay. So, these are the rules that we are supposed to follow whenever we define an identifier. Then we will focus on keywords. So, what are keywords? Already we have learnt that keywords are the system defined identifiers, which are all the reserved words of the language. Every keyword has got its own specific meaning and the keywords are all case sensitive. So, see to that when we are trying to use the keywords, most of the keywords will be having or will be defined using lowercase characters. So, we should be careful about defining the keywords. We should follow the case. If it is in the uppercase, we should use only uppercase. If it is lowercase, we should only go for using it as a lowercase character. C language uses 32 keywords. So, the table which you are able to see in the screen carries the list of 32 keywords starting from auto, break, case, care, const, continue, default, do, double, else, enum, extern, float, for, go to, if, int, long, register, return, short, signed, size of, static, struct, switch, type def, union, unsigned, void, volatile and while. These set of 32 keywords are frequently used in any C program which conveys or which is reserved for some meaning and some statements. Say for instance, when I take int as the keyword, int is a keyword which is used for defining a variable which is of integer type. So, how I will be able to use the keyword in my program? It is by giving it as int and the variable name A1. Supposing if I am defining the variable name as A1, the data type I am selecting is of int. So, now int becomes the keyword here. I am not supposed to use it this way, which is wrong, because the keywords are all case sensitive. Int is a keyword which should be mentioned only with lowercase characters. So, it is very important to see the way that the keywords are defined in any language. C uses 32 keywords. So, as such we are supposed to use those keywords in our program. Then there is one more category called constants. We will see what are constants. Constants are values that are assigned in a program. Say for instance, when I am going to use some value, say for example, if the application is a banking application, if I am going to use the rate of interest or the principal amount or a bill amount, I will have to use some constants, I mean numerical values in my program. So, in those cases the constants are the numbers that could be mentioned in the program that remains the same throughout the program. We will not be able to change the values of the constants once if it is defined with the keyword const. Say for instance, you can see here in the slide that the number 1, number 2.5, these are all the way that the constants can be defined. So, how we will be able to define the constant is with the keyword const. Use the keyword const, this is the data type and this is the variable name. See, this is the keyword, const is the keyword, double is the data type which mentions that the floating point value can be stored, and pi is the variable, and this 3.14 value is the constant. So, we are assigning the value, the constant value to a variable which is of double type. So, the whole thing mentions that the value 3.14 is a constant using the keyword const. So, once when we define like this, then Pi is a constant and Pi and 3.14 values both are now interchangeably can be used in the program. So, whenever we use the term Pi, it means that 3.14 is the value which is represented by Pi. There are 4 types of constants. Integer constant. The integer constant is a numerical value which is a whole number without any fractional or exponential part. Say for instance, when I am defining an integer variable int a is my integer variable, if I want to assign an integer constant to it, it should be a whole number. It should not be a fractional number. So, now we can call that 10 is the constant, a is the variable and int is the data type to define the variable and the value constant 10 is assigned to that variable. There are 3 types of constants in this case. Decimal constants, if at all if we are using the decimal number system whose base is 10, then we can say that it is a decimal constant. Say for example, when I am giving it as int a or const is a keyword to define that as constant. So, when I give const a equal to 10,000, which includes the number system from 0 to 9. So, it includes the values 0 to numbers from 0 to 9. So, it goes with the decimal system, decimal number system, then we can call this as a decimal constant. Octal constant is of base 8 which goes with the octal number system. In octal number system, the digits from 0 to 7 are allowed. In the case of digital number system, 0 to 9 are allowed. In the case of hexadecimal number system, the values from 0 to 9 and the alphabets A, B, C, D, E, F are allowed. So, 0 to 9 will represent the values from 0 to 9 and A is used to represent the value 10, A is used to represent value 10, B is used to represent value 11 and C the value 12, D value 13 and E value 14 and F value 15. So, since it covers the values from 0 to 15, it includes totally 16 values, 16 constants. So, hence it is defined as hexadecimal constant. So, hexadecimal number system will be of base 16 which includes 16 values starting from 0 to 9 and A to F. So, this is how the hexadecimal constant representation would be there in the C language. So, how to define an hexadecimal constant? It is like, so I can make it as const int a equal to. So, since I am going to use decimal hexadecimal number system, I will have to differentiate that as 0x. 0x will be able to differentiate that it is an hexadecimal constant. Okay. With 0x, I can start defining the hexadecimal number. 9 comes under the hexadecimal number system. C comes under the hexadecimal number system which represents the value 12 and then 8. 8 is also in the hexadecimal number system. So, this is a valid hexadecimal constant which we can define using the integer data type. Hence, it is named as integer constant. Then the next category is floating point constants. Floating point constants will include the numerical value represented in the form of fractional form or exponential form. If it is in the fractional form, it will be 2.5, 3.8, it can be 2.5, 3.8. If it is going to be a whole number which needs to be represented in the floating point constant, can be represented as 3.0. And one interesting thing with C language is that even if we are supposed to represent as numerical value without 0, it will automatically be able to convert that as 3.0. So, supposing with floating point constant, the keyword to be used is float. With floating point constant, if I am defining a variable of a constant value like this, okay, then automatically A will be taking up the value 3.0. So, this is an interesting fact with C. And the exponential notation will be using two parts called exponent and mantissa. The mantissa part can be represented as a usual floating point value, and the exponent value, the power value, will be represented as E and then its power. So, for example, this value will be represented as minus 0.22 into 10 power minus 5. Okay, this value will be represented using the mantissa part and the exponential part. And the character constants are the interesting constant types in C programming, which will be indicated using single quotation marks. So, wherever we see single quotation marks, those characters or single characters will be enclosed within single quotation to denote that it is a character constant. And the fourth category is of string constants. One interesting thing with the C language is that a single character will be represented using single quotation and a string will be represented using double quotation or double quotes. Even if you are going to represent single character and if it is enclosed within double quotes, then it is considered to be a string constant. Say for instance, as given in the example, if you are enclosing it within single quotes, it is a character constant. It is a character constant. Whereas, if the same single letter, even though if it is represented in using double quotes, then it is named as a string constant. Because the way that C stores the value will be different. In the case of string constant, it will be stored as a continuous group of characters. So, in order to differentiate a string from a character, the quotation mark differs. So, we have come to the summary part. On summarization, in this module we have learnt about the character set. The character set in C language includes the alphabets in English starting from A to Z, either in the lower case or in the upper case, and it includes the digits from 0 to 9. Also, it includes the special symbols, as we have seen in the table. The special symbols are meant for special purposes. So, those are also included under the character set. Apart from this, the blank spaces, new line spaces, the non-printable characters like carriage, written and form feed is also allowed as a character set. And C tokens are the words which are formed using the character set. The tokens are again being able to classify that as identifiers and keywords. Identifiers are the names given to the variables, functions, blocks, loops and whatever we use. If you are giving our own name, it is called user defined name. Those user defined names are called identifiers. And keywords are the system defined names. There are 32 keywords in C language, and every keyword is used for a special purpose whose meaning and its case cannot be changed. So, we have to use the keywords as it is, which are defined in the C compiler. And we have also gone through the constant types. So, constant is a value which can be given in a program which is of 4 types: integer constant, which includes the numerical values with whole numbers, which is categorized as 3 categories as hexadecimal, octal and decimal. Then floating point constants are the constants which includes two ways of representation. One will be the fractional representation, the other will be the exponential form. In the case of fractional representation, it is represented with the decimal point, and exponential, which is represented with the exponential and mantissa part. And character and string constants are differentiated with the representation of quotation. Character constant are represented using single quotation and string constant with double quotation. Thank you for watching this particular series, and I think you might have benefited of learning the programming style of C language. Thank you.